creatures are some of nature's most wonderful gifts and living connections to a world we can only observe. Watching wildlife in their natural habitat can be one of life's very special moments. They're beautiful, powerful, and separate from us, which is part of their intrigue. But when people take these animals from their natural world and bend them to try and fit into theirs, it creates nothing but disaster, and on so many levels. It's bad for the animal, bad for the person, and bad for the community. Linda Searles is the director of Southwest Wildlife Sanctuary, a licensed rescue and rehabilitation center for wild animals whose lives have been changed by man.
Cinnamon Bear was with her mother in Tucson, and she was doing what bears should do. They were foraging around in the trees, and a family saw them and thought, gee, wouldn't it be fun to feed these bears? Then we could have the mother bear and the baby bear come to our backyard every day, and it would be really cool. We'd get lots of cool pictures. So they started doing this. Well, in a very short period of time, Cinnamon and her mother became what we call nuisance bears. Once the homeowners and family realized this, they called the game department, who had to come out and catch the bears and relocate them. They were relocated, and within a very short time, Cinnamon made her way from the relocation point down into another urban area and started begging for food, going through trash cans, walking into people's yards, and so she had to be removed. We were able to catch Cinnamon so that she could stay here and tell her story as it is. She is now an ambassador for why you don't want to feed bears in the wild. Feed a bear, kill a bear is pretty much how it works out.
Well, unfortunately, when you buy them, you get this cute little baby alligator, which is American alligator, which is about, maybe 3 months old. They come out of the egg about 10, 11 inches long. They do this little chirping, and people think that's cute, but they grow about a foot a year. So in about 10 years, you got one the size of Charlie over here, who's about 250 pounds, and Lucy back there, she's a year or two younger, and she's 175 pounds, and they're not even, and Charlie's only about halfway grown.
Cinnamon the bear and Charlie the alligator will now have to spend the rest of their lives in captivity. But they are the lucky ones, because space in certified sanctuaries was available for them. Most are not so fortunate.
The fate of most of these animals is to be euthanized because there's not enough shelters, there's not enough places in the United States that can handle all of them because they're being bred and commercialized at such a rapid rate. So there are a lot of roadside zoos, a lot of places that they end up that are bad places that they shouldn't be, which actually will then start breeding them again.
You know, it's incredible the number of animals that come through the Wildlife Center here at Game and Fish. We have had bobcats, Bengal tigers, African lions, servals, caracals. We've had gray fox, we've had kit fox, we've had fennec fox, which a lot of these are exotics. Some of these are definitely not animals that make good house pets. We've also had black bears. Can you imagine living in an apartment and trying to raise a black bear? We actually had one that somebody thought that they could condition it and train it and teach it to live in an apartment. That is never going to happen.
But people still keep trying to make it happen. In order to make a wild animal fit into their lives, the animals are often mutilated in an attempt to make them more domestic. This mountain lion was living in a house in Phoenix and was the victim of a botched declawing job, and now has to undergo more surgery to try and relieve her painful feet. The same fate befalls many bobcats and other exotic cats. You don't have to take an animal directly out of the wild to end up with a wild critter in your house. There is such a demand for these animals that there's a flourishing trade in exotic species, which is, more often than not, illegal.
Plus, when you do that, you're promoting the exotics trade, which is promoting cruelty. You're promoting a trade that oftentimes sells animals to whoever will buy them, whether it's legal for the people to have them in that state or not. Thus posing heartbreak on the people when they have to give up their animal, and then the animal ultimately loses his home or his life. So in all, it's a lose-lose-lose situation for the animal, and it's a lose situation for the people that bought the animal. And when they buy that animal, they've left another space on the shelf which will be filled by that breeder. When you go to zoos and you see lots of baby animals, you have to wonder where they go. And the way the exotic pet trade actually started, the way a lot of these animals ended up in private ownership. For example, tigers. There are more tigers in private ownership in the United States now than there are in the wild in the world. And that is a very, very sad statement. And the way this happened is a lot of zoos were breeding animals excess because the public liked to see baby animals, so it got ticket sales up. When you see baby white tigers, and every year they have baby white tigers or they have baby tigers, you have to stop and ask, where are they going at the end of the year when they're grown up? Where do those animals go? Because next year they have another litter, and the next year they have another litter.
You also look at Montana, the bald eagle. She came to us about 3 years ago. Last April, she was 6 years old. She was born in a nest on the Missouri River just outside of Bozeman, Montana. Probably during the migration, she was on her way down and apparently possibly got hit by a car, but she had a broken wing. The thing is, we know somebody definitely had her in captivity, tried to rehabilitate her, did not know what they were doing, did not get the proper medical care and treatment for that wing. So because of that, she's no longer able to be released in the wild. Unfortunately, now she's going to be in captivity for the rest of her life, which is really sad.
The serval was being used to breed exotic cats by breeding an African serval to a domestic cat to create hybrid cats called Savannahs. And this is very popular, and they're doing this with a lot of different breeds of cats today. It's a cruel process. Most of these animals make really lousy pets in homes. They are very fractious, they're very nervous, flight type animals. They typically will only bond to one person in the household. So it's just a bad idea. It's bad for the animals, it's bad for the exotics as well.
All of these animals have instincts that you cannot change. Things in their wild nature that are destructive and dangerous in private life. Russ Johnson of the Phoenix Herpetological Society has a great respect for the reptiles he rescues.
You read about in Florida all the time somebody being attacked. They don't know the difference between us and a pork chop.
A lot of people say, well, if this cat's domesticated, if the bobcat's domesticated, why can't I keep him in my house, or the serval or the mountain lion? Because, you know, they lay on the sofa, they act sweet. Everybody knows what their house cat, if you had a house cat before in your life, you know what that house cat can do to you. If they're frightened, if they play too rough, if they're angry, they can do serious damage to you. So take that strength and that danger and multiply it times 20 pounds, 40 pounds, 50 pounds, 60 pounds, 80 pounds, 100 pounds. Now you're talking about serious injury, possible death, especially to a small child in the house or a visiting grandchild or neighbor child. This is just a bad, bad idea. Not good for the animals, very unsafe for the family, for the children, for the neighborhood.
And just because an exotic animal is not illegal to have, doesn't mean it has any business being a household pet. The iguana is the #1 animal surrendered to the Herpetological Society.
Well, our #1 rescue is the green iguana by far. We do several rescue, probably between 50 and 100 a year just in the green iguanas. The green iguanas are, we call somewhat a disposable pet because of their inexpensive cost. They're generally run about $25 in the pet store. Tiny little lizards about 6 to 8 inches long when they start. They're somewhat handleable at that point. People buy them and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. Then they either move or something's changing in their lifestyle and they can no longer take care of this thing, and then they either dump it off in their yard. Green iguanas won't survive out here in the Arizona desert. It's too hot and too dry. They basically start having kidney failure in about 3 weeks. It's much too dry and there's no humidity here. They come from a very lush tropical environment. So again, number one on the rescue list or turn-in list for us is the green iguana.
So that means that private and government agencies are left to deal with the problem.
Well, Animal Care and Control is primarily responsible for dogs and cats, but our phone room receives a good 40,000 calls a month, and quite a lot of those calls are from individuals who have gotten an animal that they shouldn't have gotten. They didn't take the time to research the animal. They thought it was cool at the time to get the animal, and now all of a sudden they're dealing with problems. It's startling to me. It's startling that people would consider getting an animal without doing the research and without thinking about who this animal is and what the animal's needs are and how that's going to impact their life and their family. They get animals for the wrong reasons, and then we end up with the problems and the calls, and other agencies end up with the problems and the calls down the road.
Another thing that we have happen is people turning them loose, thinking, well, wolves or wolf hybrids born in captivity could learn to revert easily to the wild. Mountain lions that I raised in my house with my family could easily revert to the wild. Not true. They're going to pose a serious threat to people, and they're most likely going to be shot in very short order. If you have an animal like this and you need to turn it in, call the game department, call the American Sanctuary Association, call us. Look for an accredited sanctuary, because otherwise they could fall back into the hands of somebody that's going to breed more.
Getting animals into a sanctuary is only part of the challenge. Since these facilities are nonprofits that run on donations, they have the burden of housing, feeding, and caring for these animals.
We could use a lot of help, anything from labor to, we've had a nice construction company has donated some wood for us on a building we're building and some insulation. And right now what we need is the funds to do this.
Oftentimes when we get these animals in, people will say to me, well, gee, you've got these two beautiful mountain lions. Surely there's lots of zoos that would want these mountain lions. There's lots of zoos that would want these bears. Why don't you give them to them? The zoos don't have room for them. There are too many. The exotics trade has produced too many mountain lions, too many black bear, too many tigers, too many of everything. So there is a huge, huge surplus. You can buy a tiger for as little as $350. You can buy a mountain lion for $350. But when they're grown, they now pose a danger to the family, and they're now costing you $800 a month to feed them. And that's when the people decide, gee, this wasn't such a good idea, and we want to place this animal. And there's only so many places to place them. We're filling up and running out of space, and they're still breeding. Wild animals are exactly that. They're wild, and they deserve to have the right to be wild and free. They don't deserve to be caged or locked in a house. We have dogs and cats, domesticated animals that have been domesticated for thousands of years that make very appropriate, very good pets. And wild animals don't. They bite, they mark their territory by urinating and defecating in your house.
Perhaps Russ Johnson puts it best.
Anything you can't cuddle up to really doesn't make any sense to have as a pet.
Especially when there are so many wonderful domestic animals waiting for a home. Animals that depend on people to survive and that are very good in the cuddle department. Wild animals are unique, mysterious, and fascinating, but only if they're allowed to be what they are and not what we want them to become. Respect their wildness and leave them where they are. Don't exploit them by aiding the exotics trade. Instead, go out in Arizona's great outdoors and experience them as they should be, wild and free.